I used to love fireworks. My birthday is on July 7th, so I often got fireworks for my birthday and would shoot off any extras that we had from the 4th. Having your own fireworks show for your birthday was really cool as a kid, but then one 4th of July celebration turned into a nightmare that really turned me off of fireworks. On top of my family going overboard on the fireworks, our whole street would have a block party for the 4th of July. Every year, everyone would pull money together for a massive display. And I don't mean some cute little fountain or sparklers galore, no, we're talking professional grade stuff. Everyone would gather in the cul-de-sac, some adults were cooking, everyone was eating. All the kids were shooting stuff off during the day and the start of the night. Then, once we were finished, the adults would then set off their large displays for everyone to enjoy. But one year, Mr. Henderson decided he wanted to one-up everyone. He went to the next state over and spent a ton of money on firework packs. The problem with this was that the stuff that he got wasn't legal in our state, and probably not legal in general. He went to some random Joe that he claimed to be friends with that made his own firework displays. I could tell they were homemade because they didn't look like the stuff we normally got. It didn't have the wrappers on the sides with names, it didn't have the bright arrows pointing towards the wicks or instructions. It looked like it was just wrapped in gray paper and then wrapped again in plastic wrap. Just looking at them made me nervous. It certainly didn't look safe. But most of the other adults were excited to see it, and my dad even asked for his friend's contact info to get his own the next year. I trusted the adults, especially my parents, so I told myself that everything would be fine. So that night went on as normal. People gathered in their small groups, the adults talking, including us kids showing off our bravery as we held 2 or more sparklers at once. But then Mr. Henderson started talking about showing off some of his stuff. It was dark at this point, but not too late, around 9 or 10 p.m., I believe. I was sitting in the chair next to my mom when Henderson went to the little platform the Martins made for the fireworks. He lit it with a lighter and then walked back toward his wife. I watched the wick as it sparked, getting shorter and shorter until it reached the firework. Then it stopped. Many laughed, as it was common to have that one firework that gets weird and doesn't light. Mr. Henderson approached the platform again. I saw the lighter flick on, a quick spark from the wick, and then immediately followed by a boom. I jumped as the fireworks shot up, and Mr. Henderson jumped back. It popped in the sky in pretty colors, and everyone loved it. They laughed and teased him, but said that it was worth it, and we all moved on. It startled me, but the adults all seemed to be okay with it, so I felt like we were safe. That everything was okay. But something still wasn't sitting right with me. Then, a little later on, Mr. Henderson wanted to shoot off another one. It started the same. He carried this bulk brick up to the platform, my dad with him, holding a flashlight. He lit the firework and they all backed up. Once again, I watched the wick spark and braced myself for that loud boom. But this one didn't have problems lighting up at all. In fact, this one blew up before the wick even finished. Unfortunately, this one didn't do what it was supposed to. It exploded outwards instead of upwards. And some shot towards my mom and I, and some shot to our right, and some towards the back. At first we jumped, and there was nervous laughter about that one, and how he should get his money back. But what no one had noticed was that one of the explosions had shot towards the fireworks stockpile. There was a burning mortar that didn't burst open when it shot outwards, until it hit those fireworks. Everyone was talking and laughing, and then there was an even larger boom. Fireworks, all different kinds, began exploding in every direction. Projectiles screamed through the air from the fireworks at us. I watched as people jumped, trying to avoid them. My mom pushed my younger brother out of the way of one of them while another shot toward us, hitting me in the thigh. It burned right through my shorts, and I remember screaming as I felt it burning. I tried patting it out until finally I just took them off and ran to our porch. Listening to everyone screaming, the fire, kids crying, all the while the fireworks just continued going off. It was nightmare fuel. I stood there not knowing what to do. I was only 12, but I felt like I needed to do something. Save someone? Try to put out the fireworks? What was I supposed to do? I was sobbing as I went to get the home phone and called 911. I brought it back outside, still standing pantless, explaining to them what I saw. I could only imagine how horrifying it sounded to that person that got my call. A child crying with people screaming in the background. While they were on the phone, I could hear sirens coming and I thought that they got there fast. Apparently someone else had phoned it in too. The operator did their best to calm me down and help me with my burn. It at least kept my mind occupied. Then I let them go when I heard my mom screaming for me. I ran back out, holding the paper towels to the crater in my leg to let my mom know that I was okay. She was walking up the porch, holding my little brother who was crying too. She told me to watch him and that she would be right back. I brought him inside where he pointed to his face. He must have been hot with stuff falling from the sky because he had soot sprinkled on his face and part of his hair was singed, and his eye was a very red watery mess. I was worried that something got in his eye and he was complaining about it burning. I wet down a rag to wipe his face and try to soothe it, treating it similar to what the operator had told me to do. Once he was calmed down enough, I turned on the TV for him, put some shorts on finally, and went back outside. And there was a fire truck now trying to put out the fire in the hedges of our neighbor's house. There was a car alarm going off, and I saw an ambulance and paramedics treating someone lying on the ground. The person on the ground was Mr. Henderson. He had tried to put out the fireworks stockpile, and when he was close to it, something else exploded and covered the front of his body. He had some pretty bad burns all over. My dad was also trying to help and got burned, but not anywhere near as bad. He put his arm up to block his face, but had some pretty bad burns on his arm. One of the teenagers got some severe burns, and another one ended up having to cut her hair pretty short because something landed in it and actually caught it on fire. Her hair was very thick and long, and that's actually who I had heard screaming. And she was trying to put it out, but she kept swinging her hair around, so they had to pull her to the ground and stomp on her hair. By the time the fireworks were finally and completely waterlogged, it had been at least an hour, but felt so much longer. It was hot and humid as is, but with the smoke and that awful sulfur smell, it was so hard to breathe outside. This was some time ago, but it became pretty clear pretty fast what had happened. If you didn't already put it together, the fireworks Mr. Henderson got were not professional, and they were nowhere near safe. They were just made by some guy in his garage, thinking he knew what he was doing. Stuff didn't light because the wick wasn't properly connected and most of the stuff wasn't even packed properly, which is what led to them exploding outward instead of up. A lot of people were rightfully upset, and several kids had been hurt. Mr. Henderson especially was upset and incredibly remorseful. He ended up reporting the guy, and it was in our local newspaper. He'd been using and modifying old mining explosives that were incredibly unstable. Not to mention, this guy didn't know anything about that kind of stuff. I actually heard my dad talking about it one time. Some of us have lasting scars. I have a dark spot on my leg. My brother made it out okay after his eyes got flushed out and people's hair grew back, but the trauma never left me. And since then, I've honestly been terrified of fireworks. I will still light off some of the small stuff like smoke bombs or sparklers, just simple things like that. The fun little fountains that moved on the ground, those parachutes, all that. I couldn't watch it anymore. Anytime one moved, I would damn near have a panic attack that it was going to fly toward me or someone else. They did continue to do the fireworks display in our neighborhood, but when it got dark and they started doing all the big stuff, I would just go back inside. I was hoping that once I got older I would grow out of it, but I still have a fear of fireworks. I can now sit outside and watch the little fountains go off, but anything else, I still can't do it. I don't blame Mr. Henderson, but I do just wish people would take fireworks safety seriously. If you want to shoot them off, if you want to celebrate whatever, it doesn't have to be this never-before-seen show. Buy the stuff from certified places. It's really not worth someone's life or health just to have a bigger and louder boom. Back in my 20s, my girlfriend Stacy and I lived in a decent little apartment complex where most people were pretty chill. At the point where this story takes place, we had lived there about 6 years, and we knew most of our neighbors and most of them quite well. Like, shared keys to feed the pets and water the plants, kind of knew them. We all got along, talked a lot in passing, and probably knew enough about each other that they could be family. But then, one year, this woman moved into the same building we lived in, 2 doors down from us. I'll call her Denise. Right off the bat, Denise was different, and not necessarily in a bad way. Or at least not at first. She was probably in her mid-40s, lived alone, no pets, no visitors that we ever saw. I saw her carrying in boxes on her own, but never saw her with any help. I was expecting to see a truck one day so I could offer to help, but either it never happened, or she managed to have them over when we weren't home. Most people in our building at least say hi in passing, but Denise actively avoided eye contact. She would literally turn around and go the other direction if she saw people coming. If we both walked out at the same time, she would go back in until I was gone. At first, Stacy and I just figured that she was shy, or maybe she was going through something tough. Alas, live and let live. But then the complaints started. About a month after Denise moved in, Stacy and I got called into the building's management office. They said they received a noise complaint about our apartment, and they asked us to keep the quiet hours in mind. We've lived there long enough that I don't think they felt like we were out here being troublemakers. We did have a game night, and had a few friends over, so I just assumed that maybe we got a touch too excited, so I accepted it. We apologized, made a mental note to bring it down a notch, and we were on our way. 2 weeks later, there was another complaint. This time, there was a letter attached to our door from the office saying the cooking smells coming from our place were disturbing other residents, and to make sure that we open windows, use stove vents, etc., and to try to avoid strong scents. I was confused because the day before we got the letter, I had made a simple curry. It's something I probably make once a week and had never gotten complaints before. I also always use the exhaust fan and the ceiling fan because otherwise it would get too hot in there anyways. We just, again, accepted it and moved on. Then, one day on my way home from work, one of our neighbors, Mike and Kelly, said that they got a noise complaint too. The problem with this is that Mike works nights, so he's not home. Kelly works during the day from home, but they're the quietest people ever. They never have people over, and you typically have to initiate conversation with them. That's why he asked about it. He asked if we had heard anything and apologized to us. We certainly didn't hear anything from their apartment and had never had issues with them before either. But as the days continued, more and more of us long-term residents were getting complaints about the silliest things. Noise, smells. Someone got a note because she left her porch light on after 8 p.m. She keeps it on because, again, her partner gets home from work late. And someone else got one for having a trash bag on her patio. her private patio that only the residents can get to. The thing is, it wasn't even trash. She had a bag covering a plant that she had just moved out there. We were all getting frustrated and wondering if maybe the office was trying to weed out all of us long-term tenants in hopes to charge more to the new people. But the office people just didn't seem like the type to do that. Then, we all started piecing the timeline together and realized the complaints didn't start until after Denise moved in. The complaints were all petty enough for someone like that to do, just to cause problems, and of course the office wouldn't say who they were coming from. But it became pretty clear when all the complaints were for people in the same building as ourselves and Denise. I wanted to say something to her, or maybe even the office, because it wasn't right. But instead of getting mean, Stacy had a better idea. The complex held a little Independence Day celebration every year for our little community. It was nice because they would block off part of the back parking lot, which gave the kids a safe place to shoot fireworks. They also have a cookout and ask anyone who attends to bring something, whether it's meat, sides, desserts, drinks, just anything to make it easier. Stacy and I are very outgoing people, so when we found out they did this, we attended every year and helped wherever we could. We also brought our grill down and helped with the cooking, and even contributed to the fireworks for anyone to use. But when 2020 showed its ugly head, they of course canceled it for that year and 2021. We asked about it for 22, and they said that they weren't going to host it indefinitely, so we decided to have a smaller version of it and kept it to the folks in our little complex. We had all gotten to know each other pretty well, and after talking to them, they also agreed that it was a good idea. Stacy said that she would go and invite Denise in the hopes that we could all get to know her, and maybe she would loosen up a bit. I was certainly reluctant and was expecting Denise to slam the door in Stacy's face, or just maybe not answer at all, but to my surprise, she answered. She was polite, if not shy and quiet, and accepted her offer. So I thought at that point, maybe this would all actually work. Fast forward to the day of our cookout, we were all out back and Mike and I had started grilling. Everyone brought out chairs for us to have a place to sit, and we started enjoying each other's company. It's something we haven't really been able to do to this extent. About an hour into the cookout, Denise walked around back carrying a box. I ran to help her, and with a smile on her face, she explained that she made her famous 3-bean chili and her family's cheesecake. I was impressed. She was smiling, talking about what all she used in her chili, and even joked about her secret ingredient that made it her own. We set them out on the table with the rest of the spread and got her a chair. Like I said, color me surprised by how social she had become. She was chatting with everyone, making jokes, and even asking others about the food they brought. I could tell that a lot of us were relieved, but I did notice how she was pushy about people trying the stuff she made. She kept talking about how the cheesecake recipe was very special, because it had been a part of her family for decades. Unfortunately, I had been eating a lot before she showed up. Stacy and Kelly both made some killer finger foods, as they normally do, and I had a few brats on top of that. I never did try the chili, but I told her I would pack a small container for myself to have later, and while she seemed a little disappointed, she accepted this. I'm also not a big dairy person, and cheesecake especially. I don't like the textures of most of them, so I only took a small bite of what Stacy cut for herself. It tasted pretty good, but still wasn't my thing. Nothing against the cheesecake at all. But everyone else that had both seemed to really enjoy it, and by the end, we were all in a food coma. That is, we assumed it was a food coma. Kelly said that she was going to head home early because she wasn't feeling well, and she just assumed she overate. No big deal. Then Mike said that he was feeling the same, so he left. The conversation slowly dwindled as we all noticed the look in everyone's faces. And Steven told us that he probably shouldn't have had so much cheesecake since he was out in the sun, and after trying to help clean up some, he had to run to the side of the complex because he got sick. I offered to help him back to his place, and he accepted because I honestly don't think he would have made it on his own. He looked pale and was having trouble standing. And that's when I started feeling a bit weird. Mentally, that is. There were 3 people now that were not feeling well after our little party. Was something bad? Was it food poisoning? Does that even hit that fast? I was physically feeling fine, and when I looked back at the group, I saw several other people looking a bit out of it, including Stacy. She said that she was just going to take something and would come back to help clean up. By the time I walked back to the lot after dropping Steven off, most of the people were gone. Denise was still in her seat with a glass of tea staring up at the sky. I asked her where everyone went, and she said that some left saying they were tired and some said they weren't feeling well. This convinced me that something must have happened to the food. We all ate the same stuff, and most of us were feeling sick now. So what was bad? Or was the meat not cooked properly? I was freaking out. I thanked Denise for coming, but started picking up, which included me stacking all the food in a box, not caring if it was stored or not, as I was going to throw it all out. I didn't know what it could be, and there was no way for me to figure it out. Denise thanked me for inviting her, and left with her container of chili and cheesecake. Not much left of either, and then I asked her how she was feeling. I remember her shrugging, her smile fell a little as she said she felt fine, just a bit warm from the heat. So why didn't she seem to feel ill? Then I realized I wasn't feeling ill. So if it was the food, what was there that neither myself nor Denise ate? I started thinking more on this and realized the only thing I didn't really have was the cheese ball that Jessica brought and Denise's chili and cheesecake. But Denise, from what I remember, had a little bit of everything, except her own. I remember her not eating her own food and someone had asked about it. Her explanation was that she was lactose intolerant, so while she loved cheesecake, it didn't love her. And she said that she was snacking and having the chili as she made it, so she wasn't too hungry. But as I said, she was still eating everyone else's stuff. This immediately got me thinking, and you know where I'm going with this, I would hope. But I didn't even know how I could go about proving that Denise could have put something in her own food. Most of it was consumed, and she had taken the containers back with her. I checked in with everyone that was there and learned just how ill they had all gotten, including Stacy. Some were throwing up, some were in severe stomach pain. Some, including Stacy, practically slept in the bathroom. I ended up taking her to urgent care, fearing that she was dehydrated. We told the doctor how it came to this, at least what we knew, and they were honest and said that her symptoms specifically definitely seemed like a bad reaction to something. We went in claiming possible food poisoning, but the doctor felt it was something more than that, which is when we explained the party. Unfortunately, this was 2 days later, so the party was long over and Denise probably long discarded the leftovers. The illness lasted about the same time for everyone else that we checked on too. I couldn't help it, and I asked them about the foods too, and a few of them agreed with me that something wasn't right. Everyone was eating prior and we all felt fine, until Denise showed up with her share. But would this woman really try to drug or even poison us? We all treated her like one of our own, welcoming her to our party and conversation, but she'd been calling in complaints on us, or most likely. Again, I guess I can't confirm that. It's just awfully convenient that she moved in, the complaints started, and we would all end up sick as hell when she showed up. I'd like to say that we have some kind of resolution, but we never did. We couldn't prove anything, so nothing could be done. Not like we could call the police and say, hey, we think our neighbor poisoned us a few days ago. All we could do was go back to how we were. Those of us that knew each other stuck together, and we all did our best to avoid Denise. There were a few more complaints that were made, but after going to the office about it, they said neither the person complaining nor them could prove the claims, so they never took action. In less than a year, however, Denise moved out. One day, the office manager was standing in the doorway complaining to someone in the apartment, and we learned that she had left abruptly. She told the office that she was moving out. They asked her for timelines since she would be breaking the lease, and she never responded. They went to talk to her and found the place trashed with very little taken. Her clothes and some other belongings were taken, but she left everything else, making it their problem. I guess, surely, the office manager was pissed off enough about it that she let it slip out that Denise was the one complaining. So, she moved in, complained about all of us, tried to potentially poison us, and then left? None of us, including the office, understands why she did this, and I don't think we will ever have answers. But all I know is that I hope she found some happiness somewhere. But for me personally, let's never meet again. Hey Raven, I wanted to share something that happened to a few friends and I last year during a 4th of July get-together. My friend Lee invited some of us to his parents' place for a cookout. What was so special about their place was that it was in the middle of nowhere. When Lee left the state for college, they downsized on their home and bought a small farmhouse-style house surrounded by trees for miles. They had more acreage than square footage of the house. I don't know if they were planning on making the house bigger or not, but it wasn't a bad house by any means. It was in good condition. 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath, flat level. It was perfect for them. I've known Lee since I was a kid, so I knew his parents pretty well too. Anyway, just trying to give a little detail about the place we were going to be staying. His parents were going to be visiting his mom's sister, his aunt, for the holiday, and they told Lee he could use their place. The cool thing about it was that we could do whatever we wanted out there. No worries about people complaining we were too loud or shooting fireworks off too late into the night. Just a chill night for some of us friends to get together. Something we didn't get to do very often anymore. It was myself, my girlfriend Bree, Lee and his girl Nicole, and then 2 of our other friends, James and Miguel. We all brought our part, including foods, drinks, a few fireworks. I know I said that we would have no issues with fireworks out there, but we also weren't very big on them. Like, we grew out of them, but there were still a few things we liked to do. Bottle rockets, Roman candles, and such. Because, we're mature adults. Anyway, we all showed up there on our first night, and we probably talked more than anything, forgetting that none of us had even thought about dinner. So that just became a free-for-all on the snacks. It was a much-needed getaway, and we were all in great spirits that night. The following night was the 4th, and we were planning a full-on cookout. Lee had the grill fired up, making whatever the hell we had that he could cook. We all played frisbee together. Some of us shot bottle rockets at each other because we're still stupid. But we were having a blast. As the afternoon faded into the evening, the girls suggested that we make a bonfire. They had a fire pit a little further out, so it was already there for us. We gathered some branches and dried leaves and quickly had a fire going. We all sat by drinking, chilling, and legit just having a good time. I hadn't seen these people in a while, and that was my kind of night. Around midnight, I think we all started fading a bit. We were all in our seats, lying back, light talking or giggling, but for the most part, we had all calmed down quite a lot. Probably more crashing after such an active and hot day. The trees blocked out most of the moonlight, leaving us with just our dying fire. We stopped feeding it, knowing that we would probably all be going back in soon. As we all sat there silently watching the fire, we started hearing a rustling noise coming from the trees. The first thought in my head was that it was some nocturnal animal out there, probably not used to people being out in their area this late. But then I started really focusing on the sounds. It sounded different, like footsteps, but also like someone was dragging their feet or something along with them, maybe. Not a sound you would expect for wildlife, especially if it was a predator. We were in an area that was common for mountain lions, but I've heard them walk and it wasn't like that. I'd been leaning back looking at the sky when I heard this, and when I started to notice the irregularities. I then looked down to see everyone staring toward the tree line behind me. Nicole mentioned nervously that maybe it was a deer, but I don't think Lee picked up on her wanting that reassurance. He immediately shook his head and said that it wasn't a deer, but that he had no idea what it was. I could tell by Nicole's face that she was pretty scared at that point. Bree ended up going back in the house with her, trying to get her mind off of it. Bree was a little more understanding in knowing that we were in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by wilderness. There were going to be a lot of things out there, but she was also good friends with Nicole, so I could tell by the look she gave me that she was just going to take her inside to keep her busy. However, the rest of us were still curious about what it could have been. I still couldn't place the sound, and when I asked Lee, he said he wasn't sure either. But then he mentioned that it did sound like something was dragging, so I at least assumed I was right about that. James suggested that we check it out, and Lee hesitated for a moment. If we had the same thought in mind, he was trying to decide if it was safe. If whatever that thing is would be fearful of us or not. He must have figured that we were good because he stood up and motioned for us to follow. We all stood up and moved behind the chairs. Miguel made a joke about the boogeyman, and we all had some laughs about it. But then we were stopped dead in our tracks when we heard this low, guttural growl coming from the trees. It wasn't like any animal I've ever heard. It was deep and wet, and it immediately put me on edge. It almost sounded like something from a sci-fi movie, no lie. I had no guesses at this point. It stopped us all in our tracks as we listened to it continue with no breaks in the growling for over 10 seconds. What could even go on that long? Lee, however, began walking again, clearly determined to not back down and to not look like a coward. I don't know why, but then the rest of us didn't move. He walked closer to the tree line, and when he was about a foot away, we saw these piercing yellow eyes come out from behind a tree. It wasn't yellow from, like, that reflection that eyes get on light. They were legit bright yellow. We couldn't make out anything else on the creature other than its eyes both facing forward, and it had a large, dark shape. It appeared to be quadrupedal, or at least hunched over like one, but we couldn't even tell if it had fur or not. We all froze in our place when we saw the eyes, but then Lee slowly reached into his pocket. He pulled out his phone and turned on the flashlight and went to point it at the creature. The only thing we saw for a brief second was a deep red, and it looked wet, like blood. But before we could even process what we were looking at, this thing let out another loud growl, showing us its teeth, and then it ran up the tree. We all backed up, not knowing what it was doing at first, until we saw it grab onto the tree and climb, jump by jump. I continued to back up, not wanting whatever the hell this was to pounce on me, but then we could see it jump from one of the trees to the next, and then the next. What the hell could climb a tree like that? And what the hell could have made those sounds? What the hell has those kind of bright yellow eyes? It could have possibly been injured and then still escape like that. I was over it once I saw it jump through the trees. It wasn't making sense to me, and I quite honestly didn't want to find out anymore. I turned to run toward the house and saw that James was already running. I followed after him, and when I turned to look, so were the other two. When we got back to the house, we all calmed down before we walked inside, not wanting to freak out the girls. but it was too late. As we walked in, we heard them shriek and ran to the back where the spare room was, the room where Bree and I were staying. They had their backs against the south wall closest to the door, staring with terrified eyes at the window. I asked what had happened, and they said they had just been talking when there was a loud thud against the window. That alone made them jump, but then they also saw the glowing yellow eyes. Lee walked away and I heard the side door open. I followed him out into the back where the bedroom window was. With his phone light on, we looked around that part of the house, and we saw a lump on the ground below the window. When we got closer, we could tell that it was a recently killed rabbit. I won't go into any further details past that, other than to say that it had clearly been thrown or maybe slammed into the window. It didn't look right. None of this did. There was no one around for miles, and we were on private property, so no one should be around. There was a creature with yellow eyes and a weird build/posture that could climb trees. It also appeared to be injured based on the bloody spot that we saw, yet it didn't seem to slow it down any. Then, either that same thing that was jumping away from the house managed to get back to it before us and scare the girls, or there were multiples out there. And was the rabbit supposed to be some kind of threat, maybe? All I know is, after that, we all went back in and we had to tell Bree and Nicole what we saw, because they knew something was up, and we all hardly slept. We all camped out in the living room, now fully awake. With no more excitement for the night, we finally started to calm down. Bree and Nicole actually fell asleep on the love seat. Lee on the couch. I slept on the floor. Miguel ended up back in the room that we started in, and James slept in the other room. He was behind the couch for a while, but I think he must have woken up and gone to the bedroom. The next morning was a bit awkward. No one really talked about what happened the night before, and I personally didn't know what there was to say. We all know what we saw. The guys, especially, but the girls saw those eyes. We all got up and shuffled around the house for a bit and had breakfast. And then Lee suggested we leave early and go to an amusement park that wasn't far from where we were. No one disagreed. It was clear what Lee's intentions were. We all packed up and left and had a great time at the park, but Lee, Miguel, and I talked about what we saw while we were waiting in line for something. Apparently, Lee went back out to check for that rabbit before we left, and he said that it was gone completely. No signs of it other than a slight mess left on the window, which he cleaned up with the water hose. I suggested that he tell his parents to install some cameras, like trail cams or deer cams, to see if he could catch whatever those things were, and he said that he was going to bring it up to them. I even offered to help him install them if they did. So far, that hasn't happened, but I also don't know how much he told his parents. Part of me really wants to know what we saw out there, but I'm also terrified to know the truth. The thing fled from us, like it felt threatened, but at the same time, the thing with the rabbit makes me think that it did that to threaten us. And I don't think that exact behavior is common in wildlife, or at least none that I'm familiar with around that area. Sorry for not giving any details of the area, but since it is private property, I don't want anyone to get any ideas. If they ever do set up some cameras and or see something like that again, I'll be sure to give an update. Until then, I'll also be keeping up with Lee from the safety of my own neighborhood. So that, my friends, was a collection of some cookout stories. Though this time around, the ones I got all seemed to kind of lean towards 4th of July, the Independence Day celebrations, so there's that. It was not intentional, but that's kind of how it works sometimes. I don't get to pick and choose what I get sent to me. I don't get to pick and choose what I find, that kind of thing. So, hopefully, you all enjoyed the stories. If you did enjoy them, please do hit that like button on this video. That helps tremendously. The other thing that helps tremendously is subscribing if you're new and haven't subscribed yet. And you can also leave me a comment if you would like to do so, telling me how you spent your weekend, your holiday weekend. I didn't do much, so yeah. Let's see. You can also join Patreon and memberships, get early access to content like this. You can also listen to the podcast in longer format on other platforms. It's all that information's on the main website as theravendreams.com, which is helpfully also where you can submit your stories if you got them. So do anything you want to do. Just keep being the amazing you that you are. And all that said, friends, hope you have a wonderful week coming up. Hope I see you again here very soon. But until then, remember that you are loved, that you are valid, you are important, you are the best you that you can be. Don't forget it. Until next time, my friends, much love and sleep well.